Hello, and welcome back to Fireside Fairytales. My name is Rory. I'm a writer with the Varietal, writers commune of writers from Vancouver. And while I am a writer, I will be reading old stories tonight. A chance to hear stories of the past or things that you may have heard pieces of or referenced to in media, and now's your chance to know the whole story. So July is kind of our slow month. So we've been using July and I guess now August to talk about mythologies. So if you want to know, like, when did we start doing this? We started with some Norse mythology about 3 weeks ago. And then 2 weeks ago, which is relevant to today, we read the story of Prometheus. And I believe that stream is called Prometheus Gives Us Fire, and it's in the same playlist as this video. And what we're going to do is a story that was requested on that video that is related to the Prometheus story, and that is the story of Io. In other words, a cow. Yeah, that's all we're going to do tonight. It's not that long of a story, and this won't be that long of a stream. We are still in the middle of summer, so streams are not necessarily gonna run for an hour and a half as per usual. Hello, Suki. As per usual, let me know if in the chat if anybody has an issue with the sound. And beyond that, all I'll say is there's a video that's going up tomorrow. And it's a video with Avalon. So it's only about 2.5 minutes long, and it's one first of a series of videos that she's going to do that will come out at the rate at which I can edit it, which so far has been slow, but we're hoping that'll hurry up. So if you're checking out the channel tomorrow, it's not live, it's a pre-recorded thing. Check out the video tomorrow with Avalon. And also on Thursday, we will also have a live stream, and I think what I'm going to do is take some vintage pictures and develop maybe like ghost stories or historical context, fake of course, out of those pictures, old vintage pictures. So if you're interested in that, that's called Lick Games. We do that on Thursdays at 6:30 p.m. But you came here for a story, so I guess that's what we'll do. We'll read a story. So you'll notice that in the picture here, there's an Egyptian iconography, and that will come into relevance. The picture has a cow in Egyptian and a peacock, all of which are related to the story, and of course, if you read the title, Hercules. The story of Io. In the town of Argos, there lived a maiden named Io. She was so fair and good that all who knew her loved her, and said that there was no one like her in the whole world. When Jupiter in his home in the clouds heard of her, he came down to Argos to see her. She pleased him so much, and was so kind and wise, that he came back the next day and the next and the next, and by he stayed in Argos all the time so that he might be near her. She did not know who he was, but thought that he was a prince from some far-off land. For he came in the guise of a young man, and did not look like the great king of earth and sky that he was. But Juno, the queen who lived with Jupiter and shared his throne in the midst of the clouds, did not love Io at all. When she heard why Jupiter stayed from home so long, she made up her mind to do the fair girl all the harm that she could do. And one day she went down to Argos to try what could be done. Jupiter saw her while she was yet a great way off, and he knew why she had come. So, to save Io from her, he changed the maiden to a white cow. He He thought that when Juno had gone back home, it would not be hard to give Io her own form again. But when the queen saw the cow, she knew that it was Io. "Oh, what a fine cow you have there," she said. "Give her to me, good Jupiter, give her to me." Jupiter did not like to do this, but she coaxed so hard that at last he gave up and let her have the cow for her own. He thought that it would not be long till he could get her away from the queen and change her to a girl once more, but Juno was too wise to trust him. She took the cow by her horns and led her out of town. "Now, my sweet maid," she said, "I will see that you stay in this shape as long as you live." Then she gave the cow in charge of a strange watchman named Argus. It's a very oddly phrased sentence. Who had not 2 eyes only, as you and I have, but 10 times 10. Argus led the cow to a grove and tied her by a long rope to a tree where she had to stand and eat grass and cry moo, moo from morn till night. And when the sun had set and it was dark, she lay down on the cold ground and wept and cried moo, moo till she fell asleep. But no kind friend heard her, and no one came to help her. For none but Jupiter and Juno knew that the white cow who stood in the grove was Io, whom all the world loved. Day in and day out, Argus, who was all eyes, sat on a hill close by and kept watch. And you could not say that he went to sleep at all, for while half his eyes were shut, the other half were wide awake, and thus they slept and watched by turns. Jupiter was grieved when he saw what a hard life Io had been doomed to, and he tried to think of some plan to set her free. One day he called sly Mercury, who had wings on his shoes, and bade him go and lead the cow away from the grove where she was kept. Mercury went down and stood near the foot of the hill where Argus sat, and began to play sweet tunes on his flute. This was just what the strange watchman liked to hear. And so he called to Mercury and asked him to come up and sit by his side and play still other tunes. Mercury did as he wished and played such strains of sweet music as no one in all the world has heard from that day to this. And as he played, queer old Argus lay down upon the grass and listened, and thought that he had not had so great a treat in all his life. But by and by those sweet sounds wrapped him in so strange a spell, that all his eyes closed at once, and he fell into a deep sleep. This was just what Mercury wished for. It was not a brave thing to do, and yet he drew a long sharp knife from his belt and cut off the head of poor Argus while he slept. Then he ran down the hill to loose the cow and led her to the town. Story takes some left turns in the next little bit. But Juno had seen him kill her watchman, and she met him on the road. She cried out to him and told him to let the cow go, and her face was so full of wrath that as soon as he saw her, he turned and fled, and left poor Io to her fate. Juno was so much grieved when she saw Argus stretched dead in the grass on the hilltop that she took his 100 eyes and set them on the tail of a peacock, and there you may still see them to this day. Then she found a great gadfly, as big as a bat, and sent it to buzz in the white cow's ears and to bite her and sting her so that she could have no rest at all day long. Poor Io ran from place to place to get out of its way, but it buzzed and stung till she was wild with fright and pain and wished that she were dead. Day after day she ran, now through thick woods, now in the long grass that grew on the treeless plains, and now by the shore of the sea. There's Juno catching Mercury, trying to lead Io away. By and by she came to a narrow neck of the sea, and since the land on the other side looked as though she might find rest there, she leaped into the waves and swam across the entire Mediterranean Sea. And that place has been called Bosphorus, a word that means the Sea of the Cow from that time till now, and you will find it so marked on the maps which you use at school. Then she went on through a strange land on the other side, but let her do what she would, she could not get rid of the gadfly, the one the size of the bat. After a time she came to a place where there were high mountains with snow-capped peaks which seemed to touch the sky. There she stopped to rest a while, and she looked up at the calm, cold cliffs above her and wished that she might die where all was so grand and still. But as she looked, she saw a giant form stretched upon the rocks midway between the earth and sky. And she knew at once it was Prometheus, the young Titan, whom Jupiter had chained there because he had given fire to men, which is the story we talked about 2 weeks ago. My sufferings are not so great as his, she thought, and her eyes were filled with tears. Then Prometheus looked down and spoke to her, and his voice was very mild and kind. I know who you are, he said, and then he told her not to lose hope, but to go south, then west, and she would go by and by find a place in which to rest. She would have thanked him if she could, but when she tried to speak, she could only say, "Moo, moo." Then Prometheus went on and told her that the time would come when she would be given her own form again, and that she should live to be the mother of a race of heroes. As for me, said he, I bide the time in patience, for I know that one of those heroes will break my chains and set me free. Farewell! Then Io, with a brave heart, left the great Titan and journeyed, as he had told her, first south, then west. The gadfly was worse now than before, but she did not fear it half so much, for her heart was full of hope. For a whole year she wandered, and at last she came to the land of Egypt in Africa. She felt so tired now that she could go no farther, and so she lay down near the bank of the great river Nile to rest. All this time Jupiter might have helped her had he not been so much afraid of Juno. But now it so chanced that when the poor cow lay down by the bank of the Nile, Queen Juno in her high house in the clouds also lay down to take a nap. As soon as she was sound asleep, Jupiter like a flash of light sped over the sea to Egypt. He killed the cruel gadfly and threw it into the river. Then he stroked the cow's head with his hand, and the cow was seen no more. But in her place stood the young girl Io, pale and frail, but fair and good as she had been in her old hometown of Argos. Jupiter said not a word, nor even showed himself to the tired, trembling maiden. He hurried back with all speed to his high home in the clouds, for he feared that Juno might awaken and find out what he'd done. The people of Egypt were kind to Io, and gave her a home in their sunny land, and by the king of Egypt asked her to be his wife, and made her his queen, and she lived a long and happy life in his marble palace on the bank of the Nile. Ages afterwards, the great-grandson of the great-grandson of Io's great-grandson broke the chains of Prometheus and set that mighty friend of mankind free. The name of that hero was Hercules, which is why I have a theory that Hercules is technically still kind of part cow. Now, I know what you're going to say. It's just transfiguration, but that's got to have... She was that cow for over a year. like, I think on some level, there are cow principles you would have to adopt. And if you're adopting cow principles, you pass them on to your children. And I think at least culturally, there must be something cow-like about Hercules. Now, you don't have to agree, but you don't have a microphone and a camera. So in my mind, Hercules is about 1/8 cow, which might mean we can milk him. It's a thought. Hercules milk. Well, that aside, hopefully you enjoyed the story. Scorm says, I show up and hear that Hercules is part cow. Oh, Scorm, did you just walk in? Technically, that's all I planned. But somehow I got through quicker than I had before. So I kind of want to read another story, which is daring because I haven't pre-read a lot of this. But I feel like I definitely should read another story. Let's go back to the beginning. There we go. What story shall we read? I mean, this is Suki says the logic chain is stress-free. Are you saying that I made a title just out of nothing because maybe it would get people interested in the story? That's very rude, Suki. So I'm going to do something I've never done here before. I have a list of stories here. You guys tell me what story you want me to read, because I am not cutting it at like 18 minutes. Especially since we have a pretty decent churn out in chat. We have, I mean, some of these might just be too long and I'll have to cut them off, but I'm gonna narrow the choice. We could learn more about Jupiter because we've had 2 stories with him now, and we don't know anything about him. GS says 2% cow DNA. Yeah, on genealogy.com or whatever. So we have Jupiter and his mighty company. We have the story of Atlanta, which I'm not too sure what that is. I'm assuming that's Atlantis, but I like Gorgon myths always, Suki says. So is that Medusa then? She was a Gorgon? Okay, so here's what we'll put it. If you want Medusa, put Medusa in chat now. And if you want Jupiter, put Jupiter in chat now. And we'll hope. But there is one called The Horse and the Olive. There is, Kataru. You're going rogue? I honestly have no idea. My only real concern with these stories is they are written at the turn of the century, and I'm always a little concerned that they might be racist at times. Not racist because of the historical myth of them, but because the translators just add in meaningless racist observations that are definitely not in the originals. The Horse and the Olive. Chat's going wild. Medusa, 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 Medusa. Okay. I feel like this might be a little long, so let me just check the length here. It's pretty long. Okay, tell you what. We will read as much as we can read, and if I don't get all the way through it, we'll continue it next week. Is that comfortable for you, chat? Because I think this is like a genuine tale. No reason for me to waste any more time. The Quest of Medusa's Head. Number 1. The Wooden Chest. There was a king of Argos who had but one child, and that child was a girl. If he had had a son, he would have trained him up to be a brave man and great king, but he did not know what to do with this fair-haired daughter. When he saw her growing up to be tall and slender and wise, he wondered if, after all, he would have had to die some time and leave his hands and his gold and his kingdom to her. So he sent to Delphi and asked the Pythia about it. The Pythia told him that he would not only have to die sometime, but that the son of his daughter would cause his death. This frightened the king very much, and he tried to think of some plan by which he could keep the Pythia's words from coming true. At last he made up his mind, that he would build a prison for his daughter and keep her in it all her life. So he called his workmen. That's quite the solution. So he called his workmen and had them dig a deep round hole in the ground, and in this hole they built a house of brass, which had but one room and no door at all, but only a small window at the top. And when it was finished, the king put the maiden, whose name was Danae, into it. And with her he put her nurse and her toys and her pretty dresses and everything that he thought she would need to make her happy. Except freedom. Now we shall see that the Pythia does not always tell the truth, he said. So Danae was kept shut up in the prison of brass. She had no one to talk to but her old nurse, and she never saw the land or the sea, but only the blue sky above the open window, and now and then a white cloud sailing across. Day after day she sat under the window and wondered why her father kept her in that lonely place, and whether he would ever come and take her out. I do not know how many years passed by, but Danae grew fairer every day, and by she was no longer a child, but a tall and beautiful woman, and Jupiter amid the clouds looked down and saw her and loved her. Of course he did. I'll try to stay on track with the story. This is the one thing about not pre-reading it. One day it seemed to her that the sky opened and a shower of gold fell through the window into the room. And when the blinding shower had ceased, a noble young man stood smiling before her. She did not know, nor do I, that it was a mighty Jupiter who had thus come down in the rain, but she thought that he was a brave prince who had come from over the sea to take her out of her prison house. After that he came often, but always as a tall and handsome youth, and by they were married, with only the nurse at the wedding feast. And Danae was so happy that she was no longer lonesome even when he was away. But one day when he climbed out through the narrow window, there was a great flash of light, and she never saw him again. Not long afterwards a babe was born to Danae, a smiling boy whom she named Perseus. Well, there's a name I recognize. For 4 years she and the nurse kept him hidden, and not even the woman who brought their food to the window knew about him. But one day the king chanced to be passing by and heard the child's prattle. When he learned the truth, he was very much alarmed, for he thought that now, in the spite of all that he had done, the words of Pythia might come true. I think now, because of all that was done, she would also have massive trust issues with men. Before I turn the page, I'm having a drink. The only sure way to save himself would be to put the child to death before he was old enough to do any harm. Jesus. But that's it. That's the only way. But when he had taken the little Perseus and his mother out of the prison and had seen how helpless the child was, he could not bear the thought of having him killed outright. For the king, although a great coward, was really a kind-hearted man and did not like to see anything suffer pain. Yet something must be done. I'm going to dispute that paragraph. So he bade his servants make a wooden chest that was roomy and watertight and strong, and when it was done, he put Danae and the child into it and had it taken far out to sea and left there to be tossed about by the waves. He thought that in this way he would rid himself of both daughter and grandson without seeing them die. Wow. For surely the chest would sink after a while, else the winds would cause it to drift to some strange shore so far away that they could never come back to Argos again. That's what passes for mercy? All day and all night, and then another day, fair Danae and her child drifted over the sea. The waves rippled and played before and around the floating chest, and the west wind whistled cheerily, and the sea-birds circled in the air above, and the child was not afraid, but dipped his hands in the curling waves and laughed at the merry breeze and shouted back at the screaming birds. But on the second night all was changed. A storm arose. The sky was black. The billows were mountain high, and the winds roared fearfully. Yet through it all the child slept soundly in his mother's arms. And the Danae sang over him this song. Sleep, sleep, dear child, and take your rest upon your troubled mother's breast. For you can lie without one fear of dreadful danger lurking near, wrapped in soft robes and warmly sleeping. You do not hear your mother weeping. You do not see the mad waves sleeping, nor hear the winds the vigils keeping. The stars are hid, the night is drear, the waves beat high and the storm is here. But you can sleep, my darling child, and I know not of the uproar wild. At last the morning of the third day came, and the chest was tossed upon the sandy shore of a strange island, where there were green fields, and beyond them a little town. A man who happened to be walking near the shore saw it and dragged it up far on the beach. Then he looked inside, and there he saw the beautiful lady and the little boy. He helped them out and led them just as they were to his own house, where he cared for them very kindly. And when Danae had told him her story, he bade her feel no more fear, for they might have a home with him as long as they should choose to stay, and he would be a true friend to them both. I'm just checking chat here and having a drink of water. I think I can read a little bit more, chat. Suki says, I've read this and I wasn't here to hear a new story, but Rory, your reaction is so entertaining. I know parts of the story, I guess. I didn't know the pre-story of it. I know about Perseus. Katara says, yes, he found a great loophole. Did he, though? Or is he a really selfish jerk? Wow. What a jerk. I guess we're all just looking forward to him getting killed at this point. Okay. I'll carry on. The magic slippers. So Danae and her son stayed in the house of the kind man who had saved them from the sea. I gotta be honest, if I was doing this in modern character arc terms, she would have some trust issues going into this man's house for anything. So Danae and her son stayed in the house of the kind man who had saved them from the sea. Years passed by, and Perseus grew up to be a tall young man, handsome and brave and strong. The king of the island, when he saw Danae, was so pleased with her beauty he wanted her to become his wife. But he was a dark, cruel man, and she did not like him at all, so she told him that she would not marry him. The king thought that Perseus was to blame for this, and that if he could find some excuse to send the young man on a far journey, he might force Danae to have him whether she wished or not. This is starting to feel like a sort of feminist parable here. One day he called all the young men of his country together and told them that he was soon to be wedded to the queen of a certain land beyond the sea. Would not each of them bring him a present to be given to her father? For in those times it was the rule that when any man was about to be married, he must offer costly gifts to the father of the bride. "What kind of presents do you want?" said the young men. "Horses," he answered, for he knew that Perseus had no horse. "Why don't you ask for something worth the having," said Perseus, for he was vexed at the way in which the king was treating him. "Why don't you ask for Medusa's head, for example?" "Medusa's head it shall be," cried the king. "These young men may give me horses, but you shall bring Medusa's head." "I will bring it," said Perseus, and he went away in anger, while his young friends laughed at him because of his foolish words. What was this Medusa's head which he had so rashly promised to bring? His mother had often told him about Medusa. Far, far away, on the very edge of the world, there lived 3 strange monsters, sisters, called Gorgons. They had the bodies and faces of women, but they had the wings of gold and terrible claws of brass and hair that was full of living serpents. They were so awful to look upon that no man could bear the sight of them. I gotta be honest though, they sound pretty cool. But whoever saw their faces was turned to stone. 2 of these monsters had charmed lives, and no weapon could ever do them harm. But the youngest, whose name was Medusa, might be killed, if indeed anybody could find her and could give the fatal stroke. When Perseus went away from the king's palace, he began to feel sorry that he had spoken so rashly, for how should he ever make good on his promise and do the king's bidding? He did not know which way to go find the Gorgons, and he had no weapon with which to slay the terrible Medusa. But at any rate, he would never show his face to the king again unless he could bring the head of terror with him. He went down to the shore and stood looking out over the sea towards Argos, his native land. And while he looked, the sun went down and the moon arose, and a soft wind came blowing in from the west. Then, all at once, two persons, a man and a woman, stood before him. Both were tall and noble. The man looked like a prince, and there were wings on his cap and on his feet. Oh, that's cool. And carried a winged staff, around which 2 golden serpents were intertwined. I think we all know who that is. He asked Perseus what was the matter. The young man told him how the king had treated him and all the rash words which he had spoken. Then the lady spoke to him very kindly, and he noticed that, although she was not beautiful, she had wonderful gray eyes and a stern but lovable face and a queenly form. And she told him not to fear, but to go boldly in quest of the Gorgons, for she would help him obtain the terrible head of Medusa. "But I have no ship. How shall I go?" said Perseus. "You shall don my winged slippers, and they will bear you over land and sea." "Shall I go north or south or east or west?" asked Perseus. "I will tell you," said the tall lady. "You must go first to the 3 gray sisters, who live beyond the frozen sea in the far, far north. They have a secret which nobody knows, and you must force them to tell it to you. Ask them where you shall find the 3 maidens who guard the golden apples of the west, and when they shall have told you, turn about and go straight thither. The maidens will give you 3 things, without which you can never obtain the terrible head, and they will show you how to wing your way across the western ocean to the edge of the world where lies the home of the Gorgons." Then the man took off his winged slippers and put them on the feet of Perseus, and the woman whispered to him to be off at once, to fear nothing, but be bold and true. Perseus knew that she was none other than Athena, queen of the air, and her companion was Mercury, the lord of the summer clouds. But before he could thank them for their kindness, they had vanished in their dusky twilight. Then he leaped into the air to try the magic slippers. something I really like about the Greek gods is how wildly unpredictable they are. Like on the one hand, you're like, they'll be like, your one curl's out of place, so I will curse you for life to wander this. And then in the next story, they'll be like, and they saw the poor lowly man weep for his family and said, nay, take the golden sword of fire and kingliness. And he be, and it's like they're so what's the word? Scorm says, today I learned thither is a word. It's an old word. I don't give the Greeks credit for that one. That's because this is an older English translation. I think it's like 1903 or something like that. Well, I don't know, chat. How are we all feeling? I mean, we got 7 viewers right now. Do 7 viewers, or whoever's participating in the chat, want to hear the third part too, or do we want to leave it till next week? I'm going to leave that up to a little vote. Do you want to hear about the Grey Sisters in the North Sea that he will trick? So let me know in chat. I'm going to have to let you guys catch up a bit. I'll just remind you guys that Thursday at 6:30 p.m. we do our Lick games. I'm thinking we're probably going to take vintage paper pictures and write little maybe haunted stories, postcard stories, like sort of copy pasta stuff. That's my current thinking, and I'm flighty, so who knows, that might change by Thursday, but that's my plan for Thursday. The second thing I wanted to mention is that tomorrow we're going to have our first like pre-recorded edited video, which will be something featuring Avalon. I'm happy to hear. We have 2 votes in. GS says she wants to hear about the sisters. Suki says I'm here to finish. Well, we're not going to finish. I'll tell you why we're not going to finish, by the way, chat. In case you guys are like, no, I got nothing going on, finish the whole story, which would probably take like another hour and a half if I'm guessing. It's because my air conditioner can't be on while I'm doing this. And it's about 25 degrees in this room, and for completely silly reasons, here's my fourth wall breaking moment. I wear this traditional peasant's shirt. I don't know if anyone's ever actually picked up and appreciated this. Sort of a woolen peasant shirt with, because I think it fits the aesthetic, but it's also very hot. So I think I won't be finishing the whole story. Well, we got 2 votes on it. It's not an amazing thing, but I guess I'll tell you what. I will do the Grey Sisters. After the Grey Sisters, though, we'll call it. And then I guess next week we'll just finish out the story of Medusa, unless everybody's not interested in hearing about her losing her head. Swifter than an eagle, Perseus flew up towards the sky. Then he turned, and the magic slippers bore him over the sea, straight towards the north. On he went, and soon the sea was past. And he came to a famous land where there were cities and towns and many people. And then he flew over a range of snowy mountains, beyond which there were mighty forests and a vast plain where many rivers wandered, seeking for the sea. And farther on was another range of mountains. And then there were frozen marshes and a wilderness of snow, and after all the sea again, but a sea of ice. On he winged his way among toppling icebergs and over frozen billows and through air which the sun never warmed. And at last he came to the cavern where the 3 Grey Sisters dwelt. So I'm assuming he's basically gone up to Norseland. Well, I don't know what this would be at this time. Wouldn't be Norse in Greek era. These 3 creatures were so old that they had forgotten their own age, and nobody could count the years which they had lived. The long hair which covered their head had been grey since they were born, and they had among them only a single eye and a single tooth, which they passed Back and forth, from one to the other, Perseus heard them mumbling and crooning in their dreary home, and he stood very still and listened. We know a secret which even the great folk who live on the mountaintop can never learn, don't we, sisters? Said one. That we do, chattered the others. Give me the tooth, sister, so that I may feel young and handsome again, said the one nearest to Perseus. And give me the eye, that I may look out and see what is going on in the busy world, said the sister who sat next to her. Ah, yes, mumbled the third as she took the tooth and the eye and reached them blindly towards the other. Then quick as thought, Percy leapt forward and snatched both the precious things from her hand. Where's the tooth? Where's the eye? Screamed the two, reaching out their long arms and groping here and there. Have you dropped them, sister? Have you lost them? Perseus laughed as he stood in the door of their cavern and saw their distress and terror. I have your truth and your eye, he said, and you shall never touch them again until you tell me your secret. What are the maidens who keep the golden apples of the western land? Which way shall I go to find them? You are young, and we are old, said the Grey Sisters. Pray, I do not deal so cruelly with us. Pity us, give us our eye. Then they wept and pleaded and coaxed, threatened. But Perseus stood a little way off and taunted them. And they moaned and mumbled and shrieked as they found their words did not move him. Sisters, we must tell him, at last said one. Ah, yes, we must tell him, said the others. We must part with the secret to save our eye. It feels very Gollum. And then they told him how he should go to reach the western land and what road he should follow to find the maidens who kept the golden apples. When they had made everything plain to him, Perseus gave them back their eye and their tooth. Ha ha! They laughed. Now the golden days of youth have come again. And from that day to this, no man has ever seen the three Grey Sisters, nor does anyone know what become of them. But the winds still whistle through their cheerless cave, and the cold caves murmur on the shore of the wintry sea, and the ice mountains topple and crash, and no sound of living creature is heard in all that desolate land. Oh wow, chat, it's been quite active. It's cool. I mean, you're not obligated to talk. Obviously, it's a quiet little chill stream, but it's always nice to see that I'm not alone in a room. Winged Wang Wung, lovely, said GS. Scorm says that's hot. Give me that tooth. See, this made it worth reading the Grey Sisters. You were born to play the Grey Sisters, Rory. I guess that's a compliment, yeah. It's my range as a character. Alright, well that was much shorter, and I think I probably spent more time asking about it than it actually was. But I think I will keep my word, and I will say that's where we'll call it, because we're starting to drop viewers here, which is usually a good sign that everybody's about done. So, if you choose to tune in next week, Tuesday at 6:30, for our next episode, we will read The Western Maidens. What do we have left? Western Maidens, The Dreadful Gorgons, The Great Sea Beast, and The Timely Rescue, The Deadly whatever that is. I'm not going to try and pronounce it right now. And that will be the end of it. Okay, so we're a little less than halfway, so we got a fair bit left. So yeah, hopefully I'll see you all tomorrow, or sorry, next Tuesday in a week. Well, hopefully I'll see you Thursday as well, but if not, then on Tuesday. And we will finish out the story of Medusa. Right. Yeah, Scorm. I mean, I realized it is long. I kind of knew that when I recommended it, but I figured at least we could get halfway through it. it's like a full tale. So just in case it isn't clear to anybody what these are translated with a bit of an eye towards children. So that's why they take some fairy tale language and form, which is kind of why I think they still fit the show. But in truth, a lot of these stories are epic poems in ancient Greek. So they have a very contrived, sort of strange format to them that I don't think would sit very well on the ears nowadays. But if I was to read you like the raw translation of either Greek myth or even the Norse mythology, I have access to those. I just think no one would know what I was saying, because they sort of talk like skipping leprechauns talk in modern media. That's kind of where that comes from. It's not quite as sing-songy, but it's that weird, like changing the order of normal words and stuff to try and make a pattern fit. And I think that's probably, I think nobody's accustomed to that, so I don't think people would understand what I was saying. And so that's what these stories are, is those epic poems, narrative pulled out and put into a more modern, accessible storytelling model, as opposed to their old mythological structure. All right, well, I'm getting some thanks in chat. Thank you, folks, for showing up. Wow, we did surprisingly well for a Tuesday stream in the middle of the summer. Thank you so much for coming by, guys. If you are just tuning in now and you're like, oh my god, I missed it, you didn't. You can basically just take the slider bar in the bottom and go back to the beginning, and watch it on your own time. Because you should, because we started with the story of Io, but you'll see that we veered off into the story of Medusa. And we're going to finish that up next week. So thank you so much to everybody in the chat, Scorm, Kataru, Suki, GS, Just Fleece It Out, and anybody else I may have missed or who's sitting and lurking. And hopefully you can cuddle up to the air conditioning. The fireplace is offensive to me right now, but I guess that's my old sign off. You can cuddle up to the fireplace and get yourself a good sleep. And thank you very much for coming by my cabin.